"You're the senator?" That question, sharp as a blade, sliced through the silence of the courtroom like a siren. Every single head turned. Every neck craned. And there I was, standing alone in heels they once laughed at, in power they said I'd never have. My brother's face turned ghost white. He used to call me the dumb one, remember? Said I'd never amount to anything beyond local nuisance. Now he looked like he might throw up. Good. My name is Caroline Hayes. And from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Have you ever been humiliated so deeply by your own blood that you stopped bleeding for them? As I have. They drained me dry. 3 years ago, my brother Evan stood at our father's birthday party and toasted to real legacy, meaning himself. My parents clapped. My uncle nodded with pride. I raised my glass too, and left early. No one noticed. But let's go back to the betrayal. Not the courtroom. Oh, the real betrayal. It was the night before my graduation from law school. I came home glowing, ecstatic, with my final thesis in hand, and a letter of recommendation from a federal judge. My dream job was on the line. And guess what I found? A party. For Evan. Balloons. Champagne. My mother in pearls. My father grilling steaks. My thesis? Still in the printer tray. No one even opened the envelope I'd left on the kitchen table. When I asked why they didn't wait for me to celebrate, Mom didn't even flinch. She said, "Sweetie, this is more important. Evan just pitched to a big investor. His app could be huge." I swallowed my voice. Took my diploma and moved out that night. Quietly. No scene. Just absence. And then came the silence. Not a single call. Not one "we're proud of you." Just radio silence until election night. They didn't congratulate me when I won the local seat. They didn't even show up when I was sworn in as state senator. But now their golden boy is facing 5 years in prison for securities fraud. Suddenly, I'm their miracle. Evan sat at the defense table looking like a withered version of the smug boy he once was. His eyes met mine as the judge said, "She's the one in charge of the oversight committee. The only one who can sign off on this appeal." And right then I remembered the night he laughed at me in front of our entire family and said, "Politics is for people who want power because they were never loved." Evan, you were right about one thing. I did want power. But now I have it. And tonight you'll learn what I did with it. The hallway outside the courtroom smelled like old wood and fresh desperation. Evan chased after me, his Italian loafers squeaking on the marble. Caroline, please wait." He hadn't called me Carrie since we were kids. Before he realized it annoyed me. Before he weaponized it. I kept walking. "Caroline, please." His voice cracked this time. I stopped. Not out of kindness, out of curiosity. I turned slowly. "You're not used to begging, are you?" His jaw tightened. That same stubborn tilt he used to wear when he got away with everything. "You know I didn't mean what I said back then." "Which part?" I asked. "The part where you called me a parasite? Or when you told Mom and Dad they should cut me off?" He flinched. Good. Behind him I saw them, my parents, watching from a distance like they were peering through the glass at something fragile. Or dangerous. "Evan's scared," my mother finally said, stepping forward, her voice trembling. "He made a mistake." "And so did I replied, trusting that this family would ever care if I lived or disappeared. Dad tried to speak. I raised a hand. "No. You don't get to speak now. You told me, and I quote, 'Your ambitions are embarrassing.' We're not a political family, Caroline. We're business people. Real ones." He looked down. I took a breath. My voice dropped to a whisper. "Do you remember what else you said that day, Dad? That I was a burden? That I had no future outside of chasing fantasy causes and making enemies?" "You're not being fair," Mom said quickly. "Fair?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You know what's fair? Me sitting in that chamber 3 weeks ago deciding which bills get passed, while you were asking your accountant if you could sell the lake house to cover Evan's legal fund." Their faces froze. "So they didn't know I knew about that." "Caroline," Evan tried again. "You have the power to end this. Please. One signature and they'll reduce it to a fine." "And what do I get?" I asked. "A thank you card? A Christmas invite for once? A table at Thanksgiving that's not next to the trash bin?" He didn't answer. "You know, I continued, stepping closer until he could see every ounce of the strength he thought I'd never have. It's funny. All these years I thought I wanted your approval. But now I see it clearly. I leaned in and whispered, I want justice more. He tried to speak, but I walked away before he could say another word. As I reached the end of the corridor, I glanced at the portrait hanging above the courthouse door. The first woman to serve on the state Supreme Court. Her name was etched in gold. Someday mine might hang next to hers. But first I had a choice to make. And I already knew my answer. The next morning I sat alone at the breakfast counter in my apartment. The same place I used to cry into ramen noodles during law school. But this time there were no tears. Just silence and power. The appeal folder sat untouched beside my coffee. All I had to do was sign one page. One signature and Evan would walk with a fine and a warning. His investors would come back. His reputation might recover. But I kept thinking about that voicemail from Mom 2 years ago. If you keep pushing this political thing, don't expect us to be there when you fall. You're not part of this family if you keep choosing enemies over blood. Enemies. That's what I became to them the moment I chose to speak truth over comfort. The moment I stopped apologizing for being the girl who wanted more. My phone buzzed again. My assistant, Elena. Elena, hey boss. Press found out your brother's trial's linked to your office. Do you want me to prepare a statement? Yes, of course they did. Nothing spreads faster than family drama dressed in courtroom suits. I replied, hold the statement. Let them stew. Because deep down I knew the public didn't need an explanation. They needed a reminder. That power, when earned, doesn't come with silence. Comes with storms. I stared at the folder again. My signature line was blank. And in that blank space lived a question. Who am I serving if I save him? A knock came at the door. It wasn't Elena. It was them. My mother in a beige coat. Dad holding his favorite old hat in nervous hands. Evan silent behind them like a scolded teenager. We just want to talk, Mom said. I didn't move. You said I wasn't family anymore. We were angry, Dad muttered. No, I said softly. You were honest. Anger just gave you the courage to say it out loud. They stepped in uninvited. Typical. Like the years between us meant nothing. Like you can just walk back into someone's life after banishing them from yours. Caroline, Evan began, voice thick with false remorse. I was wrong. About everything. And if you need me to say it in front of the whole state, I will. I looked at him. No, Evan. You won't. Because your mouth doesn't know what remorse sounds like. Only fear. He blinked. Dad tried a different tactic. We raced you better than this. You're better than vengeance. I smiled faintly. Actually, you raced me to be obedient. The world raced me to be better. And you made me ruthless. Mom stepped forward. So what? You'll ruin your brother's life just to prove a point. I stood up. Walked to the folder. Tapped it once. No. I won't ruin his life. He already did that. I'm just choosing not to save him from the fire he lit. Evan's face crumbled. Please. I'll owe you forever. I walked to the door. Opened it. You've been in debt to me since I was 12, Evan. Interest has compounded. They left in silence. And that night, as the city lit up beyond my window, I signed the folder. But not the appeal. I signed the memo recusing myself from the oversight committee. Just long enough for a special counsel to take over. Someone Evan couldn't manipulate. Because justice wasn't mine to give. It was his to face. 2 days later, the media frenzy began. I watched it unfold from my office window as camera vans lined up outside the courthouse. Reporters swarmed the steps. Headlines scrolled across screens like wildfire. State senator refuses to intervene in brother's fraud case. Family ties tested as Caroline Hayes chooses justice over blood. Senator Hayes recuses herself, cites public integrity. My inbox exploded. Some praised me. Others tore me apart. But one email stuck with me. A retired teacher from Ohio wrote, "My son stole from me. I let it go." Years later, he stole from his own kids. Thank you for showing the world that love and accountability can exist in the same sentence. That sentence hit me like a thunderclap. Because for so long I had tried to be both daughter and doormat. Sister and silence. Woman and wallflower. But the moment I stepped into my truth, the world reacted. And so did my family. That night, I got a text from Evan. Evan, hope it was worth it. No apology. No accountability. Just bitterness wrapped in blame, the same old poison. I didn't respond. But I did remember. I remembered being 15, sitting in the garage watching Dad hand Evan the keys to a brand new SUV while he told me, "You don't need a car, Caroline. Focus on your books." I remembered senior year when I got into Yale and no one came to the acceptance dinner I planned. Not even Mom. She said Evan had a product launch. I remembered standing alone, holding a candle at Grandma's funeral while my family took group photos. And I wasn't in a single one. I was done being edited out of my own life. The next morning, Evan's lawyer filed a desperate motion, begging for leniency, trying to cast him as a victim of pressure and poor influence. But I had already sent the memo to the special counsel's office. And she was known for being ruthless. Just like they once called me. That evening my parents showed up at a campaign event I was speaking at. They sat quietly in the second row, out of place among constituents and veterans and community organizers. I ignored them until the very end. When the speech ended, reporters swarmed. One asked loudly, "Senator Hayes, does your family support your decisions?" I turned to the crowd, looked straight at my parents and said, "I was raised in a house that valued reputation over truth." It nearly broke me. But standing here I know I didn't break. I sharpened. The crowd fell silent. Then erupted into applause. My father stood up and left. My mother stayed a little longer. Then followed. Later that night Elena texted me a clip that went viral. She sharpened. It was everywhere. On t-shirts. On signs. On memes. The girl they once called too emotional had become a symbol. Not for revenge. But for resolve. The morning of Evan's sentencing felt like déjà vu. Same courtroom, same creaky pews, same marble coldness that reminded you, this place isn't built for comfort. It's built for consequence. But this time the power dynamic had shifted. I wasn't the ghost in the gallery anymore. I was the storm they pretended would never arrive. As I walked in, eyes followed. Judges nodded. Staff whispered. And there he was, Evan. Sitting beside his lawyer, jaw locked, hair combed, suit a size too big for the man who once carried arrogance like armor. He didn't look up when I passed. My parents sat behind him. Mom clutched her pearls like they could protect her from the truth. Dad looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. Neither of them dared meet my eyes. I sat in the front row. Close enough for him to feel the weight of everything he once laughed at. The judge entered. Gavel hit. "Mr. Hayes," the judge said, glancing over the paperwork. "Your attempt to defraud investors of over $1.3 million was not a miscalculation. It was deliberate, calculated, and cowardly." Evan didn't flinch. Not until the judge added, "And for the record, your sister's refusal to intervene is the only reason this court still believes in the independence of our institutions." My heart stopped. A small gasp echoed behind me. Then the hammer dropped. 3 years. Federal time. No parole. Evan's head dropped between his hands. I didn't blink. Because this wasn't just about justice. It was about the years I spent asking for a seat at the table. And being laughed out of the room. Now the table had turned. After court I stepped outside into the press chaos. Mics. Cameras. Flashes. They swarmed like bees, shouting over each other. "Senator Hayes. Any regrets? Do you still consider him your brother? Do you believe justice was served?" I held up my hand. "Just one." Then I said, "Sometimes the people you love force you to choose between protecting them and protecting the truth. I chose the truth. And I'll live with that." The silence was deafening. Then came the applause, not from the reporters. From strangers on the courthouse steps. An old woman in a pink coat. A young man in military uniform. A mother holding her child. They weren't clapping for me. They were clapping for themselves. For every time they stayed silent when they should have spoken. For every time they swallowed their voice to keep the peace. And finally saw what it looked like to stop doing that. That night I walked into my apartment and poured a single glass of wine. I turned off my phone. No texts. No noise. And I cried. Not for Evan. Not for my parents. For the girl I used to be. The one who bent until she nearly broke. The one who begged to be seen. And finally realized. She didn't need their eyes. She only needed her own. 3 weeks passed. No calls. No letters. Just silence. But silence can be healing, when it no longer feels like punishment. I got back to work. Met with veterans groups. Helped pass a bill on fair housing. Spoke at 2 high schools. One girl came up after and whispered, "I saw what you did. My mom still hides who she is. But you made me believe I don't have to." That meant more to me than 100 family dinners. But then one Thursday morning I opened my mailbox and found it. A letter. No return address, but I knew that handwriting. Evan's chicken scratch block letters. Always in black ink. I stared at it for hours before opening it. Inside was a single page. No greeting. Just, "I still think about the day you left. You looked back at the house like it owed you something. Maybe it did. You were always braver than me. You told the truth even when it cost you everything. I told lies even when I had everything to lose. I hope one day I can be someone you'd sit across from without hating. Until then I'll keep my head down. And maybe earn back some piece of who I used to be." No apology. But no excuses either. That was something. I didn't reply. But I didn't throw it away either. Later that weekend I ran into my mother at the grocery store. No makeup. Hair undone. She looked small. Older. She spotted me near the oranges and froze. I didn't move. She stepped closer and whispered, "Your father won't talk about it. But he watches every interview you do. Doesn't say a word, but he listens." I said nothing. She added, "I came here hoping I'd see you. Not to ask for anything. I wanted you to know that." I looked at her, really looked. This was the woman who once told me, "We don't air our dirty laundry in public," when I tried to report harassment at my internship. This was the same woman who said, "Evan's under pressure. Don't provoke him," after he cursed me out in front of a room full of people. And now she stood there, unsure of her own words. "You raised me to think silence was strength," I said calmly. "But it's not. It's just convenient cowardice." She blinked back tears. "I know." That shook me more than I expected. I picked up my basket. "I don't hate you, Mom. But I don't owe you comfort either." "I know," she whispered again. I left. That night I pulled Evan's letter from the drawer. Reread it. And for the first time I didn't feel heat behind my eyes. I felt distance. And peace. Because healing doesn't always come with apologies or reunions. Sometimes it comes in the form of a letter you don't return. And a silence you finally choose. 6 months later my name was floated on national news. Senator Hayes being considered for congressional run. Rising star from a controversial family may head to D.C. I didn't flinch. The girl who once begged for acknowledgement was gone. Replaced by a woman who didn't chase approval, she commanded respect. But then came the message. A handwritten invitation from a former teacher. "We're renaming the debate hall after our most fearless alumna, Caroline Hayes. Will you come?" I smiled. That building, it was where I learned how to raise my voice without shaking. Where I gave my first argument against nepotism, and got laughed at by boys who now sold insurance for a living. I arrived the night of the ceremony to find rows of students lined up on the lawn. Some wore pins with my campaign slogan. Some just came to hear the story. The real story. And when I stood at the podium I didn't talk about Evan. Or politics. I talked about silence. About being told to keep the peace. About how peace built on injustice is a ticking bomb, and I stopped letting it sit in my hands. "I'm not here because I was born into power," I told them. "I'm here because I was born into doubt." And I stopped letting it define me. Applause rose like thunder. Then I saw him. At the edge of the crowd. Dressed in plain clothes. Slightly thinner. A little older. Evan. He didn't approach. Just watched. Eyes heavy. Hands in his pockets. For a second I couldn't breathe. But then I gave the closing line I'd written 100 times. When someone tells you to sit down, it means they're afraid of how tall you're standing. The crowd roared. When it ended, Evan was gone. But that was okay. Because I didn't need him to see my victory. I had already seen it for myself. Back at my hotel I opened the window and looked out at the town that once told me I was too much. Too loud. Too political. Too different. But being too much is exactly what it takes to become everything they said you couldn't be. That night I slept like a child. No regrets. No noise. Just the quiet hum of peace. and the distant echo of the word that had once felt like a curse. Senator. The next time I stepped into a courtroom, I wasn't there to watch someone fall. I was invited to speak. It was a panel on justice reform, and I was the keynote. Judges, lawmakers, law students, all watching. Waiting. I walked past the same pews where I once sat alone while my brother's fate hung in the balance. Same walls. Same cold air. But everything felt different now. Because this time I wasn't there as someone's sister. I was there as me. As I took the podium, I saw Elena sitting in the front row, grinning. My staff. My people. The family I chose. I looked out across the room and took a breath. My story isn't neat, I began. It's not stitched in love and forgiveness and fairy tale endings. It's stitched in fire and scars and choices no daughter ever wants to make. I paused. The room listened. There was a time I thought family meant sacrifice. That I had to give up myself to earn their love. But the truth is, any love that demands you disappear is not love. It's control. Nods. Pens scribbling. Eyes wide. And when the moment came for me to choose between blood and justice, I chose justice. Not because I hated them, but because I finally loved myself enough not to bend. It was quiet now. Like even the walls were listening. I don't know what happened to my brother in prison, but I know what happened to me outside of it. I became someone who no longer fears being alone. Because I'm not. I glanced at Elena. At the young law interns watching me like I was telling them their own future. I am surrounded by truth. By service. By purpose. And no bloodline, no last name, and no childhood wound can take that from me ever again. I stepped down from the podium. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I had something to prove. I just felt free. Later that evening, as I walked to my car, a voice called out. Caroline. I turned. Evan. He stood on the sidewalk, tentative. Older. A little worn down but different. Or maybe I was the one who'd changed. I came to listen, he said. Not to talk. I raised an eyebrow. That's a first. A breathy laugh. Yeah. I deserved that. Silence stretched between us like a bridge. Damaged but standing. I don't expect anything, he added. But I'm trying. I got a job inside helping inmates write appeals. Turns out, words matter. I nodded. They always have. He offered a small, uncertain smile. Maybe someday we talk. Maybe, I replied. Then paused. But that's not up to me. It's up to who you decide to be when no one's watching. He nodded. Didn't press. Just walked away. And I stood there. Not broken. Not bitter. Just whole. Because in the end, revenge wasn't fire. It was silence. It was distance. It was peace. It was becoming exactly what they said I'd never be. And doing it without asking anyone for permission.